Chapter 1, The Briefing Room. The fluorescent lights in Conference Room 3B had been flickering for 6 months, casting irregular shadows across the mahogany table that dominated the space. Margaret Chen had submitted 3 maintenance requests, each one vanishing into the vast bureaucratic machinery of the Federal Aviation Safety Board without acknowledgement. She'd learned to ignore the flutter at the edge of her vision, the way you learn to ignore a persistent ringing in your ears. It was 7:43 on a Tuesday morning in late September when she arrived at the office, earlier than usual. The building, a concrete and glass monument to governmental efficiency erected in the 1970s, stood nearly empty at this hour. Her footsteps echoed in the lobby, past the security desk where Gerald offered his customary nod, past the portrait gallery of former directors whose eyes seemed to follow her toward the elevator bank. Margaret had worked as a senior investigator at the FASB for 17 years. Long enough to recognize the particular quality of silence that preceded something consequential. The office had that silence now. She could feel it in the way her badge reader beeped, a half-second longer than usual, and in the absence of the normal early morning chatter from the administrative pool. Her office was on the 4th floor, a corner space she'd earned through seniority rather than rank. The window overlooked a parking lot and, beyond it, a view of approaching aircraft descending toward Reagan National. She'd spent countless hours watching those planes, their landing lights bright against dawn or dusk, their approach so routine it had become almost meditative. The manila folder was waiting on her desk. Not in her inbox. Not paper-clipped to a routing slip. Just there, centered precisely on the green desk blotter her daughter had given her last Christmas, the one with the photo corners that held pictures of her grandchildren. The folder was thick, perhaps 2 inches, and bore no markings except a reference number stamped in red ink, FS 2847 Alpha. Margaret set down her coffee, black, no sugar, still steaming from the 3rd floor break room, and stood looking at the folder for a long moment. Through her window, a 737 descended through a layer of morning haze. She could just make out the airline livery. The folder shouldn't have been there. Protocol dictated that case files moved through official channels, assigned via email, logged in the database, presented during team briefings. Folders didn't simply appear. She sat down slowly, her leather chair creaking in the quiet office. The building's HVAC system hummed to life, rattling in the ductwork overhead. Margaret reached for the folder, then stopped. Her hand hovered above it. 17 years had taught her that some moments divided time into before and after. She could feel the weight of this one. When she finally opened it, the first thing she saw was a photograph. The image was black and white, high contrast, clearly taken from security footage. It showed a maintenance hangar at night, the kind of cavernous space where commercial aircraft undergo routine servicing. The timestamp in the corner read 2 hours 17 minutes and 33 seconds, dated 3 weeks earlier. In the foreground, partially obscured by the wing of a wide-body jet, 2 men stood in conversation. The resolution was poor, their features indistinct, but their body language suggested urgency. One man was gesturing, his hand raised in what might have been emphasis or warning. Margaret turned the photograph over. On the back, in handwriting she didn't recognize, someone had written, Hangar 7, Indianapolis. 14 hours before Flight 2847. Her coffee had gone cold by the time she looked up again. The rest of the folder contained what appeared to be preliminary investigation materials, witness statements, maintenance logs, weather reports, air traffic control transcripts. Standard materials for an accident investigation. But Flight 2847, she pulled her keyboard closer, typed the number into the FASB database, showed no record of any incident. No accident, no emergency landing, no unusual occurrence report. She tried several variations. Broadened the search parameters. Nothing. Margaret sat back in her chair, staring at the folder. Outside her window, another plane descended, its landing gear down, flaps extended, following the invisible path through the sky that thousands of aircraft followed every day. Routine. Safe. Controlled. She turned to the witness statements. The first was from a maintenance technician named Robert Hastings, employed by a regional carrier that contracted servicing work at Indianapolis International. His statement, dated 2 days after the hangar photograph, was brief. I observed 2 individuals in Hangar 7 during my overnight shift. This was unusual as the hangar was scheduled to be empty for equipment maintenance. I did not recognize either individual as regular staff. When I approached to inquire about their authorization, they departed quickly through the service entrance. I reported this to my supervisor, Dennis Kowalski, at approximately 0230 hours. The second statement was from Dennis Kowalski himself. It was even briefer. Hastings reported possible unauthorized access to Hangar 7 on the night of September 4th. I conducted a walk-through inspection of the facility and found no evidence of intrusion or tampering. Logged the incident as a potential security concern and notified facility management. Margaret flipped through the rest of the documents. More statements, each one describing the same event from slightly different angles, each one ending with the same bureaucratic conclusion: no evidence found, incident logged, no further action required. But someone had compiled these statements. Someone had pulled security footage. Someone had created this file and assigned it a reference number that didn't exist in the official database. And someone had left it on her desk. The morning sun had climbed higher, burning through the haze. Margaret's office had grown warm, but she felt cold. She returned to the photograph, studying it with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent years reconstructing events from fragments of evidence. The 2 men in the hangar, there was something about their positioning, the way they stood in relation to the aircraft, that suggested familiarity. These weren't intruders who'd stumbled into the wrong place. They knew where they were. Her phone rang, startling her. The caller ID showed an internal extension, director's office. Margaret let it ring 3 times before answering. Chen. Her voice came out steady, professional. Margaret, good morning. This is Ruth. Ruth Kellerman, the director's administrative assistant, her voice carrying its usual efficient warmth. The director would like to see you in his office at 9 o'clock. Are you available? It wasn't really a question. Of course, Margaret said. May I ask what this concerns? He didn't specify. Just ask that you bring any materials related to reference number FS 2847 Alpha. The line went dead before Margaret could respond. She sat holding the phone, listening to the dial tone, watching the planes continue their endless approach through her window. The flickering lights above cast their irregular shadows. In the folder before her, 2 men stood in a hangar 14 hours before a flight that, according to every official record, had never encountered any problem at all. Margaret looked at the clock on her wall, 8:17. She had 43 minutes to decide what she was walking into, and whether the official channels she'd trusted for 17 years were about to fail her in a way she couldn't yet fully comprehend. Outside, another plane descended through the morning sky, carrying its passengers toward a landing they would never know to question. Chapter 2, What the Records Don't Show. The director's office occupied the entire southwest corner of the 7th floor, a space that had been remodeled 3 times since the building's construction. Each renovation had added layers of bureaucratic prestige, dark wood paneling, recessed lighting, a conference table that could seat 12. The window behind Director Lawrence Paxton's desk offered an unobstructed view of the Potomac, the water gray-silver in the late September light. Paxton didn't look up when Margaret entered. He was reading something on his computer screen, his reading glasses perched low on his nose, his expression carefully neutral. He was a tall man who'd grown heavy in his 60s, his face carrying the particular weariness of someone who'd spent decades managing information he wished he didn't possess. "Close the door," he said. Margaret did. The latch clicked with a finality that seemed louder than it should have been. "Sit down, Margaret." She took the chair across from his desk, the folder from her office held against her chest. The room was silent except for the whisper of the ventilation system. Through the window, she could see a tour boat moving slowly up the river. Paxton finally looked at her. His eyes, she noticed, had deep shadows beneath them, the kind that came from too many nights of insufficient sleep. "How long have you been with the board?" he asked. 17 years. "You know that, Lawrence?" He nodded slowly. 17 years. Excellent record. 3 commendations. You worked the Cascadia incident in 2019, the Denver runway collision, the St. Louis maintenance failure case. You're thorough. You follow evidence. You don't jump to conclusions. He paused. You're also, by nature, someone who believes in the process. In doing things the right way. Margaret said nothing. She'd learned long ago that silence often revealed more than questions. "The folder on your desk this morning," Paxton continued. "I assume you've read it." "Some of it." "What did you make of it?" Margaret chose her words carefully. "I found it unusual that an investigation file would appear without going through proper channels. I also found it concerning that the reference number doesn't exist in our database." "What else?" "The flight number, 2847. There's no record of any incident involving that flight. No accident, no emergency, no unusual occurrence." Paxton leaned back in his chair. It creaked under his weight. "That's correct. Because officially, there was no incident. Flight 2847 departed Indianapolis at 4:36 p.m. on September 5 and arrived at LaGuardia 47 minutes later, 13 minutes ahead of schedule. 162 passengers, 6 crew members. Not a single report of anything unusual. The captain noted light turbulence over Pennsylvania. That's it. Then why does the file exist? Because 3 days after that flight, a mechanic named Robert Hastings, you read his statement, walked into his supervisor's office and refused to sign off on the maintenance certification for another aircraft. Said he couldn't, in good conscience, certify anything else that came through Hangar 7 until someone investigated what he'd seen that night. Margaret opened the folder to Hastings's statement. His supervisor found nothing wrong. His supervisor, Paxton said, was told to find nothing wrong. The words hung in the air between them. Outside, the tour boat had disappeared around a bend in the river. By whom? Margaret asked. Paxton stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. Do you know how many flights operate in U.S. airspace every day, Margaret? Approximately 45,000. 45,000 aircraft, carrying over 2 million passengers, managed by a system that depends entirely on trust. Trust that maintenance procedures are followed. Trust that inspections are thorough. Trust that when someone certifies an aircraft as airworthy, they're telling the truth. He turned to face her. What happens when that trust is compromised? We investigate. We issue findings. We mandate corrective action. And if the compromise goes high enough? If it involves people who have the authority to make investigations disappear? Margaret felt something shift in her chest, a tightening she recognized as the first touch of real fear. What are you telling me? Paxton returned to his desk but didn't sit. He leaned forward, his palms flat on the polished surface. I'm telling you that Robert Hastings filed his report through proper channels. I'm telling you that his supervisor, Dennis Kowalski, documented everything exactly as protocol required. I'm telling you that 4 different people reviewed the security footage from that night and all of them noted anomalies that warranted further investigation. And the file was classified under administrative review and transferred out of standard workflow. The reference number was removed from the active database. The investigation was, for all official purposes, concluded with a finding of no actionable irregularities. Who ordered that? Someone with the authority to do so. Paxton straightened. 3 weeks ago, Margaret, someone accessed a commercial aircraft in a secure hangar in the middle of the night. We have footage. We have witness statements. We have documented protocols that were violated. And we have a flight that took off the next day carrying over 160 people, and that flight completed its journey without incident. So there was no actual danger. That we know of. Paxton's voice was quiet now, almost gentle. But we don't know what those two men were doing in that hangar. We don't know what they accessed. We don't know if they made any modifications, left any devices, compromised any systems. Because we weren't allowed to find out. Margaret stood slowly. Why are you telling me this? Why give me this file? Because yesterday, Robert Hastings submitted his resignation. Before he left, he sent a letter to his union representative, copying 3 journalists and a congressional oversight committee. In that letter, he detailed everything he'd observed and everything that happened afterward. He stated that he believes the aviation safety system has been compromised and that he can no longer in good conscience participate in what he called institutional suppression of critical safety concerns. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Margaret gripped the back of the chair. That letter, Paxton continued, will become public sometime in the next 72 hours. When it does, there will be questions. Congressional hearings. Media scrutiny. And we will need to have answers. We will need to have an official record of what occurred, how we responded, and what our findings were. You want me to create that record? I want you to conduct the investigation that should have happened 3 weeks ago. I want you to document everything. Interview every witness. Review every piece of evidence. And I want you to write a report that we can stand behind when this becomes public. Margaret looked down at the folder in her hands. The photograph of the 2 men in the hangar stared back at her, their faces indistinct, their intentions unknown. What if my findings don't match the conclusion someone else wants? Paxton met her eyes. Then you'll have to decide what matters more, your career or the truth. That's a decision I can't make for you. He walked past her to the door, opened it. The gesture was clear, the meeting was over. Margaret stood in the doorway, the folder against her chest, feeling the weight of what she was being asked to do settling onto her shoulders like a physical burden. Lawrence, she said quietly. The official report. The one that will eventually be published. What will it say? Paxton looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. It will say whatever it needs to say to preserve public confidence in the aviation system, he said. But that's not the report I'm asking you to write. Chapter 3, The Names They Wouldn't Say. The Indianapolis field office was smaller than Margaret expected, tucked into a nondescript office park between a dental supply company and a consulting firm that appeared to be permanently closed. She arrived on a Thursday morning, 2 days after her meeting with Paxton, carrying a laptop bag and a growing sense that she was following a trail someone had deliberately tried to erase. Robert Hastings had agreed to meet her, but only off-site. They sat now in a diner 6 miles from the airport, a place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been brewed sometime the previous day. Hastings was younger than she'd expected, early 30s, with the careful posture of someone who spent his nights crouched in confined spaces, inspecting bolts and hydraulic lines. I appreciate you talking to me, Margaret said, her recorder visible on the table between them. I know you've already been through this. Have I? Hastings's voice carried an edge. Because the last time I gave a statement, it disappeared into whatever hole they throw inconvenient information into. I'm not here to make it disappear. Then you're the only one. He wrapped his hands around his coffee mug. Through the window, traffic moved past on the highway, an endless stream of vehicles carrying people who had no idea what conversations happened in places like this. Do you know what it's like to see something wrong and have everyone around you pretend it's nothing? Margaret thought of the flickering lights in her office, the maintenance requests that vanished. I might. Hastings leaned forward. Those men weren't supposed to be in Hangar 7. The aircraft, tail number N847QS, was scheduled for routine servicing, but that wasn't supposed to start until the next morning. The hangar should have been empty except for equipment maintenance. But when I did my rounds at 0217, I saw light coming from inside. Not the overhead floods. Focused light, like work lamps. What did you do? What I was trained to do. I approached and identified myself. Called out that this was a restricted area and asked for authorization credentials. He paused, his jaw tight. They didn't run, exactly. But they moved fast. Purposeful. One of them was carrying something, a bag, dark canvas, maybe 2 feet long. They went out through the service entrance before I could get a clear look at their faces. The security footage shows exactly what I saw. 2 men. 1 bag. But the footage has a blind spot near the aircraft itself. The cameras cover the entrances and the main floor, but there's an area under the wing where the angle doesn't reach. They were in that blind spot for approximately 7 minutes before I arrived. Margaret made notes on her tablet. What happened when you reported it? Kowalski took it seriously. He did a full inspection of the hangar and the aircraft. Checked the access logs, verified that no maintenance work had been authorized for that time period. He documented everything properly and forwarded it up the chain. Hastings's expression hardened. And then, 2 days later, I was called into a meeting with facility management and someone from corporate I'd never seen before. They told me the investigation had concluded. No evidence of tampering. No security breach. Likely explanation was contractors who'd gotten confused about their schedule. Did you believe that? No. But I'm a mechanic, not an investigator. I was told the matter was closed. He looked down at his coffee. The thing is, I could have lived with that. Could have convinced myself it was nothing. Except. He stopped, his hands tightening around the mug. Except what? Margaret asked gently. Except I started paying attention. Started watching the reports from maintenance crews, the inspection logs, the certification paperwork. And I noticed something. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket, smoothed it on the table. It was a handwritten chart, dates and tail numbers in neat columns. 3 aircraft serviced in Hangar 7 in the 2 months before that night. All 3 had minor anomalies noted during subsequent inspections. Nothing major. Just irregularities. A sensor reading slightly off spec. A panel that seemed to have been accessed outside normal maintenance windows. An electronics bay with dust patterns that didn't match routine servicing. Margaret studied the chart. These were all documented in the maintenance notes. Not flagged as significant. But they're there if you know what to look for. Hastings met her eyes. I think someone's been accessing these aircraft. I think it's been happening for a while. And I think what I saw that night was just the one time someone got sloppy enough to be noticed. The diner had grown quieter. Most of the breakfast crowd had left. A waitress refilled their coffee without asking, the pot shaking slightly in her hand. Why would someone do that? Margaret asked. What could they gain from accessing aircraft in the middle of the night? That's what kept me up at night. I ran through every scenario. Industrial espionage, stealing proprietary technology. Sabotage. Drug smuggling using the aircraft as transport. None of it made complete sense. He paused. Until I remembered something my supervisor said once. He'd worked in the industry for 30 years, and he told me the most valuable thing on an aircraft isn't the engines or the avionics. It's the data. What data? Everything. Flight patterns. Maintenance schedules. Security procedures. Passenger manifests. These aircraft are flying computers now. They generate terabytes of information. And if someone could access that information, intercept it, modify it, he let the sentence hang. Margaret felt the pieces beginning to assemble themselves into a picture she didn't want to see. You're suggesting someone is compromising aircraft systems to access their data networks. I'm suggesting that's one possibility. But here's what really scares me. Hastings leaned closer, his voice dropping. After I filed my report, after the investigation was shut down, I started getting calls. Nothing threatening. Just check-ins. Someone from headquarters asking how I was doing. Someone from the union mentioning they'd heard I'd had some concerns, offering support. My supervisor suggesting maybe I'd been working too many overnight shifts, maybe I should take some time off. They were monitoring you. They were reminding me that they were watching. That they knew I'd noticed something I wasn't supposed to notice. And when I resigned, when I sent that letter, you know what happened? His laugh was bitter. Nothing. No calls. No pressure. Just silence. Like they'd been waiting for me to leave, and now that I wasn't worth worrying about anymore. Through the window, a plane passed overhead, its landing gear down, approaching the airport. Margaret watched it descend, thinking about the passengers inside, reading magazines or sleeping or checking their phones, trusting that everything about their flight was exactly as it should be. The two men in the hangar, she said. Did you ever see them again? Hastings shook his head. But I've been thinking about something. The way they moved, the confidence they had, these weren't amateurs. They knew exactly where the camera blind spots were. They knew the hangar schedule. They had access to a secure facility in the middle of the night. He met her eyes. Whoever they were, they had help from the inside. Maybe they were the inside. Margaret's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, we need to talk. Not on phone. Tonight, 8 p.m., parking garage level 3, building 7. No signature. She showed it to Hastings. Recognize the number? No. But if you're getting anonymous messages already, you're making someone nervous. He stood, leaving cash on the table. Be careful, Ms. Chen. The official report might leave out the most important parts, but the people who know those parts. They don't like it when someone starts looking for them. Chapter 4, Level 3. The parking garage was concrete and shadows, each level identical to the last. Margaret arrived at 7:45, early enough to watch the approaches, late enough that most of the daytime workers had gone home. Her car was parked on level 2, engine running, an exit strategy if she needed one. 17 years had taught her caution, but the last 72 hours had taught her something else. The system she trusted could turn against her faster than she'd ever imagined. At 7:58, she took the stairs to level 3. The fluorescent lights here were spaced farther apart, creating pools of darkness between the parked vehicles. Most were empty. This building housed contractors and administrative overflow, people who kept regular hours. Her footsteps echoed off the low ceiling. She stopped near a concrete pillar marked with a faded 3C, scanning the shadows. Ms. Chen. The voice came from behind her. She turned to find a woman, mid-40s, wearing a dark coat despite the mild evening. Her face was familiar in a way Margaret couldn't immediately place, someone she'd seen before but never actually met. I'm sorry for the theatrics, the woman said. But there are certain conversations that can't happen in offices with security cameras and logged phone lines. Who are you? My name is Amanda Reeves. I was a senior analyst in the Technical Standards Division. I worked on certification protocols for avionics systems. She glanced toward the stairwell, a nervous gesture. I was also the person who originally flagged the Hangar 7 incident for investigation. Margaret's pulse quickened. You pulled the security footage. I did more than that. When Hastings's report came through, I cross-referenced it with maintenance logs, access records, and flight data from N847QS. What I found was, she stopped, choosing her words carefully. Concerning enough that I elevated it to my division chief with a recommendation for full investigation. What did you find? Amanda pulled a tablet from her bag, the screen casting blue light across her face. The aircraft's data recorder showed an anomaly during the time frame Hastings reported. Someone accessed the forward electronics bay. The access was logged, but the authorization code didn't match any scheduled maintenance. When I tried to trace the code, it led to an account that had been deactivated 3 years ago. A ghost account. Exactly. Someone with sophisticated knowledge of our systems used credentials that shouldn't exist to access that aircraft. And when I started looking deeper, I found similar patterns going back 18 months. Different aircraft, different locations, but the same signature, unauthorized access using deactivated credentials, always during overnight hours, always in the brief window between security sweeps. Margaret felt cold despite the garage's stale warmth. How many aircraft? 16 that I could confirm. Probably more that were better hidden. Amanda's fingers moved across the tablet screen. But here's what made me realize this wasn't just industrial espionage or routine security breaches. Every single one of these aircraft, within weeks of the unauthorized access, experienced what we call minor technical anomalies. Nothing catastrophic. Just odd communication systems that briefly failed to respond. Navigation data that required recalibration. Flight management computers that logged errors that shouldn't have been possible given their programming. You think someone was testing something? I think someone was installing something. Small modifications to the aircraft systems. Not enough to cause immediate failure, but enough to create access points. Backdoors into the flight management network. She looked up from the tablet. Do you understand what that means? Modern aircraft are completely computer-controlled. The pilots input commands, but the computers execute them. If someone could access those computers remotely, they could override the pilots, Margaret finished. The implications cascaded through her mind like falling dominoes. They could control the aircraft from the ground. In theory. I don't know if they've actually done it. But the infrastructure is there. The access points have been created. Amanda's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And when I presented all of this to my division chief, when I showed him the evidence and recommended we ground every affected aircraft until we could conduct physical inspections of their systems, do you know what he said? Margaret waited. He said, "Thank you for your thorough work. I'll take this to the director immediately." Then he asked me to send him all my files, all my research, everything I'd compiled. He said it was too sensitive to leave on shared drives. Amanda's laugh was hollow. I sent it to him at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon. By Monday morning, my access to the technical database had been revoked. I was reassigned to administrative review of training protocols, basically a desk job reviewing paperwork. My division chief told me the investigation had been handled at a higher level and my services were no longer needed. Did you keep copies of your research? I'm not stupid, Ms. Chen. Of course I kept copies. She handed Margaret a USB drive, the small device feeling impossibly heavy. Everything's on there. The access logs, the flight data, the pattern analysis. It's not complete. They cut me off before I could finish, but it's enough to show what's happening. A car engine started somewhere on a lower level, the sound echoing up through the concrete structure. Both women tensed. Why contact me? Margaret asked. Why not go public yourself? Because I have a daughter in college and a mortgage and a career that's already hanging by a thread. Because I watched what happened to Hastings when he tried to speak up, and I'm not brave enough to become the next example. Amanda's eyes glistened. But you're conducting an official investigation. You have Paxton's backing. If anyone can get the truth into the record before they bury it completely, it's you. Amanda, if what you're telling me is true, this goes beyond a safety violation. This is a systematic compromise of commercial aviation security. The people behind this, they'd have to have resources, technical expertise, access to the highest levels of our own agency, Amanda interrupted. Yes. That's exactly what I'm telling you. Whoever's doing this, they're not external hackers or foreign agents. They're us. Or at least, they have people on the inside who are protecting them, enabling them, making sure investigations like yours get redirected or shut down before they can find anything real. The garage seemed to close in around them. Margaret thought of Paxton in his office, the shadows under his eyes, the way he'd said, "You'll have to decide what matters more, your career or the truth." "There's something else," Amanda said. "Flight 2847, the one Hastings saw them working on. I pulled its complete flight history for the month after the incident. Want to know what I found?" Margaret nodded, though part of her wanted to refuse, to walk away, to pretend this conversation had never happened. That aircraft flew 127 commercial flights in the 30 days after someone accessed it in Hangar 7. It carried 18,000 passengers. And on September 28, during a routine flight from Chicago to Miami, it experienced what the pilots reported as an unexplained autopilot disconnect. The plane dropped 3,000 feet in 45 seconds before the pilots regained manual control. The incident was logged as a computer glitch. Maintenance found nothing wrong. The aircraft returned to service the next day. Margaret's hands had gone numb. Were there injuries? Minor. Some passengers, a flight attendant. Nothing serious enough to trigger a major investigation. Just another incident report in a system that processes thousands of them every year. Amanda's voice broke slightly. "But Ms. Chen, the data logs from that flight, the ones I accessed before they locked me out, they show something the official report doesn't mention. For those 45 seconds, the flight management computer was responding to commands that didn't come from the cockpit. Someone else was flying that plane." The USB drive felt like it was burning in Margaret's palm. Around them, the parking garage had gone silent. No more car engines, no footsteps, just the distant hum of ventilation systems and the sound of her own breathing. "What do you want me to do with this?" Margaret asked. "Write the report they're afraid of. The one that tells the truth. Document everything, not what they want the public to believe, but what actually happened. Because right now, there are 16 aircraft flying with compromised systems, carrying thousands of passengers every day, and the people who know about it have decided that public confidence is more important than public safety." Amanda turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing. The authorization code that was used to access those aircraft. I traced it as far as I could before I lost access. It was originally assigned to an inspector named Gerald Voss. He retired in 2021. I tried to contact him to ask about his credentials being used. And he died in 2022. Car accident on Route 50, late at night, single vehicle collision. The official report said he fell asleep at the wheel." She met Margaret's eyes. But Gerald Voss had a reputation for being meticulous about safety. He was the kind of inspector who wrote up violations even when it cost him professionally. And 3 months before he died, he filed a complaint about irregularities in the certification process for new avionics systems. That complaint was reviewed and dismissed as unfounded. Amanda walked toward the stairwell, her footsteps echoing. At the doorway, she paused. "Be careful, Ms. Chen. Whatever you decide to put in your report, remember that someone has already killed to keep this quiet. And they've made it look like an accident before." Then she was gone, leaving Margaret alone in the shadows with a USB drive full of evidence and the weight of knowing that whatever she wrote, someone would make sure the official report left out the most important part. Chapter 5, The Truth in Room 214. Margaret spent 3 days reviewing the files on Amanda's USB drive. She didn't go to her office. She worked from a hotel room in Alexandria, paying cash, using a laptop she bought that morning from a big box store. The data was worse than Amanda had suggested, not 16 compromised aircraft, but 23. Not 18 months of unauthorized access, but closer to 2 years. And the patterns were unmistakable once you knew what to look for: ghost accounts, overnight access, minor anomalies that maintenance crews noted and then forgot. On the 4th day, she wrote her report. Not the one Paxton wanted. Not the one that would preserve public confidence or protect careers or allow the system to continue functioning as if nothing had changed. She wrote the truth, documented and sourced and irrefutable. 47 pages detailing a systematic compromise of commercial aviation security, enabled by individuals within the FASB itself, covered up through bureaucratic suppression of evidence. She named names where she could. Gerald Voss, whose credentials had been stolen and whose concerns had been dismissed. Robert Hastings, who'd lost his career for reporting what he'd seen. Amanda Reeves, whose research had been buried. And the aircraft, each tail number listed, each flight carrying passengers who had no idea they were part of an ongoing security experiment. At the end, she wrote her conclusion: the official report will likely state that no systemic security vulnerabilities were found, that isolated incidents were addressed through appropriate channels, and that public confidence in aviation safety remains warranted. This conclusion will be false. The evidence contained in this document demonstrates that commercial aircraft have been deliberately compromised, that oversight systems have failed, and that institutional priorities have valued secrecy over safety. Until the full scope of this compromise is addressed, every flight represents a potential catastrophic failure that we have chosen not to prevent. She printed 3 copies. One she sealed in an envelope addressed to Paxton. One she kept. The third she packaged carefully with copies of all supporting evidence and mailed to an address in Chicago, a journalist Amanda had mentioned, someone who'd broken aviation safety stories before. Then she went back to her office. The building felt different now, its familiar halls transformed into something alien. She saw the security cameras differently, wondering who watched their feeds. She saw her colleagues differently, wondering who among them knew what she now knew and had chosen silence. Paxton was waiting in her office. He sat in her chair, her window behind him, planes descending through an overcast morning. "I was hoping you'd reconsider," he said quietly. Margaret set her bag on the desk. "You knew. When you gave me that file, you knew what I'd find." "I suspected." "Then why send me? Why not just write the sanitized version yourself?" Paxton stood, moving to the window. He was silent for a long moment, watching the aircraft. "Because I'm 63 years old, Margaret. I've spent 40 years in this system. I've written reports that saved lives and reports that buried truth, and somewhere along the way, I stopped being able to tell which mattered more." He turned to face her. "I thought maybe you still could. I wrote the truth. I know. I received your report this morning." He smiled sadly. "It's excellent work. Thorough, documented, damning. Everything an investigation report should be. But it won't be the official report. No. The official report will say that initial concerns about unauthorized hangar access were investigated and determined to be a scheduling miscommunication. That maintenance protocols were reviewed and found adequate. That Flight 2847 experienced a minor technical anomaly consistent with known software issues, subsequently addressed through routine updates. It will recommend enhanced security procedures and continued monitoring, which will sound responsible without requiring any actual change. Margaret felt something break inside her, some final illusion about the system she'd served. "And my report will be classified under national security protocols. Stored in a secure database that approximately 9 people have access to. If anyone ever asks, we'll say it's part of ongoing sensitive investigations that can't be publicly disclosed." Paxton's voice was gentle, almost apologetic. "You did your job, Margaret. You found the truth and documented it properly. That's all anyone could ask. Except it won't matter. The aircraft are still compromised. The people behind this are still operating. And thousands of passengers are still boarding flights that could be remotely controlled by someone we can't identify. Yes." The single word hung between them like a confession. "Have you thought about what happens if this goes public?" Paxton asked. "Really thought about it? Not just congressional hearings and media coverage. I mean the real consequences. Grounded fleets. Billions in economic losses. A complete collapse of public trust in aviation safety. And for what? So we can tell people their fears were justified all along. So we can fix it. Can we? Paxton's expression was infinitely tired. You've seen the evidence, Margaret. This operation, whatever it is, has been running for 2 years using resources and expertise that suggest significant backing. They've compromised our own systems, corrupted our own people. You think we can just root that out? You think there's some investigation that will magically identify everyone involved and restore integrity to a system this thoroughly infiltrated? Margaret thought of Gerald Voss, alone on Route 50, his car leaving the road in the darkness. She thought of Amanda Reeves, reassigned and silenced. She thought of Hastings, who'd resigned rather than participate in the lie. What happened to you? She asked quietly. When did you stop fighting? Paxton looked at her for a long moment. The day I realized that fighting meant accepting consequences I wasn't brave enough to face. The day I understood that sometimes the best you can do is document the truth and hope that someday, when circumstances change, someone will be able to use it. He moved toward the door. You have a choice to make, Margaret. You can accept that your report will be filed away, that you've done your duty, and that the system will continue as it has. Or you can try to fight. Go public, contact journalists, force this into the open. And if I do? Then you'll lose. Not because you're wrong, but because the people who benefit from this staying hidden have more power than you do. They'll discredit you, destroy your career, possibly worse. And in the end, the official report will still say exactly what it was always going to say. He paused in the doorway. The truth will still be buried. The only difference is that you'll be buried with it. He left, closing the door softly. Margaret sat at her desk for a long time, watching the planes descend. She thought about the journalist in Chicago, whether the package would reach him, whether he'd be brave enough to publish what it contained. She thought about the passengers on those aircraft, reading magazines, or sleeping or holding hands during turbulence, trusting in a system that had already failed them in ways they'd never know. Her phone buzzed. A news alert: FASB releases findings on Indianapolis hangar security inquiry, no systemic vulnerabilities found. The official report had been published. Brief, reassuring, complete. It mentioned scheduling miscommunication and enhanced protocols. It cited thorough investigation and appropriate oversight. It preserved public confidence exactly as intended. It left out the most important part. Margaret opened her desk drawer and pulled out the copy of her real report, the one that would never be published. 47 pages of truth that would gather dust in a classified database, read by no one, changing nothing. She ran her fingers over the title page, over the words she'd written knowing they'd be buried. Outside her window, another plane descended through the gray morning, its passengers unaware that their safety depended on secrets held by people who'd chosen silence over truth. She picked up her phone and dialed the number for the Chicago journalist. It rang once, twice. "This is Marcus Chen," a voice answered. Margaret took a breath. Through her window, the plane touched down, smooth and routine, exactly as thousands of planes did every day. She thought of Paxton's warning, of Amanda's fear, of Hastings's lost career. She thought of Gerald Voss and his convenient accident. "Mr. Chen," she said. "My name is Margaret Chen. I'm a senior investigator with the Federal Aviation Safety Board. I need to tell you about a report that was just published, and what it doesn't say." The plane taxied toward the terminal. Somewhere in the building, people were already moving on to the next file, the next investigation, the next carefully managed version of truth. The system was continuing, exactly as it always had. But in a hotel room in Alexandria, in a manila folder locked in a desk drawer, in a package traveling toward Chicago, the real report existed. The truth existed. And sometimes, Margaret thought as she began to speak, sometimes that had to be enough. Even when you knew the official version would leave out the most important part. Even when you knew the silence would outlast you. The truth still mattered. It had to.